And merger between EADS and BAE Systems keeps hitting snags and hurdles. Here to discuss, aerospace and defence analyst Zafar Khan of SocGen. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Khan.
Good morning.
Lagardère has just said today that conditions attached to the planned merger are unsatisfactory and called on a rethink. What's your take on this?
We're not particularly surprised by this. Our own view is that the ratio of 60-40 favours BAE. We believe a more appropriate ratio is 65-35. It's interesting that Daimler, who hold 22.5%, are actually also arguing for a rethink. They're asking for a 70-30 split.
Does this deal make sense, do you think?
It makes sense from the BAE standpoint because they have big problems coming up in defence, where you're going to have major cuts in the Western budgets. They need to diversify away from that particular area. For EADS, it's less clear to us because they have a very good outlook on the civil business, and we think in doing this merger at this time, they are diluting that strong outlook.
So based on all that, what are the chances of this deal getting through?
There are lots of stakeholders involved in this. Obviously, you have the four governments, US, UK, Germany and France. It has to clear all of those. Then, of course, there are the shareholders. And it's interesting that EADS need a 2/3 shareholder vote. Now, the governments and their friends own just over 50%. So they do need the institutional shareholders to back this. We're only putting a 50-50 probability on this going through.
Right, and if the deal does happen, of course, we're going to see this huge company in the defence industry. On top of this, the whole industry is seeing this long-term downturn. So what is the future for other companies like Finmeccanica and Thales?
The overlap in this deal is not that huge. BA is very big in defence, EADS very big on the civil side. So we don't think this alters the landscape in any significant way. However, given the defence cuts which are coming, and this is a long downturn, we suspect 5 to 10 years of defence cuts. These companies need to consolidate. So we are going to see further mergers along the road.
Okay, so take us through your key sells and your key buys.
Well, we're quite gloomy on defence, as you may have gathered. So we are saying to sell BAE into strength. We are also sellers of Cobham, which is largely a defence company, and Finmeccanica. We like Thales, although it has a big defence exposure. This is a restructuring story with big margin uplift potential there. We also on the civil side believe that some of these stocks are now fully valued. We're selling Rolls and we're selling Boeing at these levels. On the civil side, we had one buy, which is EADS. We think at this level it looks an interesting two-way bet on the merger either falling through or going through, in which case it looks cheap when you compare it with Boeing.
And I know you said that in the short term, more M&A is looking a bit difficult, but how about in the longer term?
In the longer term, this is a classic case of when there is demand downturn, supply has to consolidate. In the US, a lot of the consolidation's already taken place, so we don't see very much in the prime area, although second and third tier companies may have some mergers. In Europe, the situation is very complex because of the national positions. So in Europe, although we do need some rationalization, because of the politics that are involved, it's going to be much more difficult to pull off.
And speaking of the US elections, they're of course very much key. Republicans will want to play the strong defense presence card, but they have a huge budget deficit.
Indeed, it doesn't really matter which party is re-elected. The reality is that they cannot afford to be spending 600 billion per annum on defense. So whichever party comes through, they will have to cut the defense expenditure.
And a quick question on mega mergers. Do they actually work? I mean, we've seen Mannesmann, Vodafone, AOL, Time Warner. Would it be fair to say that these big deals just lead to job cuts and the only ones to benefit from it are the bankers and lawyers?
I think the evidence from studies by the likes of McKinsey is very clear. 2/3 of all deals fail to deliver value. And this is particularly the case with the larger companies because of the integration risk, and often the buyer destroys value for his shareholders.
Right, we have to leave it there. My thanks to SocGen's Zafar Khan. For the latest business news and headlines, tune in to Market Pulse at 12 midday today. Until then, I'm Angeline Ong, and this is Reuters.